Welcome, welcome, and we'll of course start with our bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Amen.
And in case I haven't translated that one yet, blessed are you. And of course, the word blessed is something we could meditate on, by the way. Exactly how is it possible for us to bless God? So I think very often it's translated, "You are blessed, Lord our God, um, ruler of the universe, who has sanctified us by his commandments and commanded us to study words of Torah." So
Oh,
we are actually engaged in a divine commandment. That's what we're engaged in. We are going to go into the screen share at this point, and here we are. And first of all, a little bit of housekeeping, I think, which is I had said that I would look up some references that we had mentioned in Rashi yesterday, and I'm trying to find those references. Where are they? Let me look quickly. See if
It was in chapter 12, verse 2,
yes. So I'm looking with
second Rashi.
Thank you. Here we are. Here we are. There they are. And I looked them up, and indeed, these are the references. Okay. Exodus 6:28. So Chabad was right. This should be a Vav and not a Zion. And then Leviticus 7:38 is that one. Beyom Tzavoto, on the day he commanded him. And then Numbers 15, that is 15, verse 23. Min hayom asher tziva Hashem v'hal'a. That's the whole quote. From the day which the Lord commanded and onwards. All right, so just a little bit of housekeeping, as I said. Then, and this now became a major challenge, you are really going to have to put on your thinking caps for this one. You'll see this little table that I created here, and this is on the very first HaChodesh, the month. So the word Chadash, of course, means new. It also is another synonym for month, and that's because of the phases that the moon goes through. And incidentally, the moon is symbolic of the Jewish people because it waxes and wanes, and likewise throughout history, the Jewish people have had moments of golden moments and moments of persecution and oppression. Excuse me one moment. A little bit of early morning there. So here we go. So HaChodesh Hazeh, this new moon, we could call it new moon. Rabbi Shila b'shem Rabbi Omer. So Rabbi Shila, in the name of Rabbi, says, we did do this. I explained the term rabbi refers to Rabbi Judah, known as Judah the Prince, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, onwards. Ketiv, it is written in Psalm 104. By the way, Psalm 104, if you've never read it, is perhaps the supreme nature psalm in the book of Psalms. It is this beautiful description of nature. I sometimes call it the Sonoma County Psalm because I live in Sonoma County, and in some ways it absolutely describes in many different ways what life is like in Sonoma County, including the ocean, including fires, including earthquakes, etc., etc. At any rate, in that psalm, we find a verse, which, by the way, is the reason that this psalm is also recited at the end of the services on what is called Rosh Chodesh. That's the first day of the Jewish month, and it's considered a sacred day. And at the end of services, the psalm is added to the service at the end of the service, as I mentioned. So, Asa Yareach Lamoadim, who made, Yareach is another word for moon, who made the moon for the appointed times. So we should understand, I mentioned this yesterday, that we have a calendar in the sky. And it's interesting that looking at the text carefully back in Genesis, we realize that the creation of the luminaries isn't the primary creation of the luminaries was to create this calendar, which is an interesting take on the creation of the luminaries. And then it talks about the sun being set for day and the moon for the night to rule the night, etc., and the stars. There's some beautiful midrashim involved in that creation. At any rate, Psalm 104 clearly says, it states, who created the moon, he made the moon for the appointed times. And I think the word mo'ed, right, which actually means an appointment, And to understand, I think this gives us a deeper understanding of what we call festivals, right? We could call who made the moon for the festivals, but that does not really give you the sense of what the word mo'ed means, because what it is suggesting is that there are certain appointments that we have with our Creator that are in fact those festival days. And when you think about what happens, let's try and take apart the idea of what it is when you make an appointment. Is what you are doing is you are designating, you are creating something special, right? And significant about a certain period of time which you are saying you're going to devote for a certain purpose. And essentially what you're doing is you're taking your time and you're designating a certain time to take care of something. And so that's really, in a sense, what the festivals are about. So if you don't observe a festival, essentially you're skipping an appointment. And we know that in general, in our culture, missing an appointment is not a simple thing. It is not a simple thing. So just to tell you that here in this one word is locked up, and I'm just explaining a little bit of it. I'm just deconstructing it a little bit, but that's what the sense of a mo'ed is. By the way, another word for festival, any of you want to tell me?
I mean, besides like Chag or
That's the word. That's the word I was looking for. You got it. You got it. The word chag comes from the word chug, which means a circle. And that's because they used to march around the altar and in a circle and on these particular days. That was an act. Encircling is a very lovely way of celebrating something. Like encircling the bride and groom. And forgive me for being a little more personal about this, but I will never forget when my grandson had his circumcision ceremony at the synagogue, and we invited this back in St. Louis, and I invited my colleagues, my rabbinical colleagues, to come to that moment. It's a significant moment, and the rabbis got up onto the pulpit where the ceremony was taking place, and they danced around him just spontaneously. It was just a totally memorable moment. So dancing in a circle is very significant as well, and there's probably some symbolism involved in that may go deeply into why it is significant. So made the moon for the Moadim, for these appointed seasons. Shemesh, the sun, Yada Mavo'or. The sun knows, understands its setting. A very strange verse. And he's using this verse to explain something. Mishemesh Yada Mavo'or. So he explains that what he's reading this verse, Shemesh Yada Mavo'or, the sun knows its setting. So he's playing around with this verse, and he says, from the sun he knew when it set, and then just flips this around. You see this? Asa yareach lamoadim. He made the moon for the appointed times. And this little footnote right here is a reference now to Baruch Halevi Epstein, the author of this particular commentary, were his own personal notes. And this actually goes into something that for those of you who are somewhat familiar with the Jewish calendar and the months, know that some months are 29 days and some months are 30 days. And that's a little bit of a puzzle why that is the case. And not only that, but the 30th day of the month is also called a new moon day. And then the day that's the first day of the next month is also, so it's what we call it a 2-day Rosh Chodesh, right? Rosh Chodesh being the Hebrew for the new month day, the new moon day. And the question is, why? Why are some months 29? If they're 29 days, they just have the first day of the next month being Rosh Chodesh. But if they're 30 days, the 30th day of the previous month is Rosh Chodesh, and the first day of the next month is Rosh Chodesh. And this is going to be the explanation of that. So get ready. And by the way, I'm still struggling to some extent as we get to the end of this particular comment exactly where he's going on this. So actually, it's his next little footnote. Bi'ur ha'inyan, an explanation of this matter. Ki kayadua, that it is known, we know, monin hachodoshim, that one counts the months va'achareihem, and in other words, one counts the new moons, I think is what he means here, and the days following them. Or achareihem, nope, so I'm going to rethink that. I've got to fill this in. Hachodashim va'achareihem kol hamoadim, and following these months, these new moons, and what follows them, all the festivals, la molad halavana, that it is based on the new moon. Molad halavana, basically it means the birth of the moon. Please forgive me. So, and he goes on and say, Uvis samuch, he's just saying this parenthetically, Uvis samuch yitpa'er ze ba'arucha. And he says, and following, this is going to be explained extensively. He's going to go into a lot of detail, he says, not here, but eventually he will. And we are not necessarily going to do that here. I'm just giving you a little bit of a taste of how Baruch Halevi Epstein handles these kinds of passages. So, V'yadua, it is known, shechodsha shelevana, that the month or the new moon of the renewal of the moon, who, in other words, the time it takes from one new moon to the next, who it is, kaf tet yom, it is 29 days, v'chatzi, and a half. It's 29 and a half days. That's how long it takes for from one new moon to the next new moon. And that's basically when the moon transits the sun. In other words, the new moon basically comes in between the earth and the sun. And we talked about this a little bit yesterday. Keshiur hekef halavana. In other words, here he's saying that's the amount it takes. That's of the moon to do its to do its revolution. That's the length of time that it takes for the moon to revolve around the earth. And he says 29 and a half days. Uvitzimtzum, and he says if you're going to be absolutely exact about how long it takes, in other words, the exact amount of time is kaf tet yom, 29 days, ve'yud bet sha'ot, 12 hours, ve'tash tzag, that in letters comes to 700, that is 400 plus 300 plus 90 plus 3, so 793 chalakim. A chalik is 1,080th of an hour. This is an amount they knew way, way, way back. Probably, I would say, I'm trying to think, in the 1st century, maybe a little later, I don't know. I will tell you that the Babylonians were the ones who, at least from what I can tell, were very much into astrology. And in order to practice their astrology, they observed very carefully the motions of the heavenly bodies. And they figured out a lot of these things. We know that the Babylonians were the ones, the reason why we have 60 seconds to the minute and 60 minutes to the hour is Babylonian. It's a sexagesimal system. But this is exactly how long it takes. And I went down, so a chelek, which means a part, is 1,080th of an hour. And here we go. So I made this little table. Please make sure, those of you who are more arithmetically inclined than I am, make sure I'm doing this part. Okay, so 1 hour equals 1,080 parts. 1 minute, therefore, equals 1080 divided by 60. I believe that comes to 18. Make sure I'm correct. I hope I am. 18 parts. And then if you take 18 parts and divide it by 60, you get 1 second equals 3/10 of a part. So a part is longer than a second, but it's essentially, okay, so we can go the other way around. So 793 equals 237.9 seconds, which equals 39.65 minutes. So a lunar month is 29 days, 12 hours, 39 minutes, and 39 seconds. We might be able to approximate that up, take it to the nearest minute and second there, but that wouldn't be quite right, I guess. So 12 hours and almost 40 minutes, right? Almost. But they were that accurate. They were that careful about their measurements. So going on. So now we know that inconveniently.
Roll that back just a second. I wanted to get the last little bit.
Sure.
I'm copying. Okay. 12 hours, 39 minutes, and 39 seconds. Thank you.
All right. And let's hope I'm correct. Now what was I going to say about this? Oh, yes. Very inconveniently. Wouldn't it be lovely if it took exactly 30 days for the moon to revolve, to revolve around the Earth? Wouldn't that be wonderful? But it is not the case. It is an inexact figure in terms of days, hours, and seconds. It's inexact. So here we go. So this presents an interesting puzzle, right? So it says, "Vayitba'er b'samuch." He says it will be explained just close by in Ot Zayin, and I assume he means number 7, which I think has to be one of these. In other words, here this could be this right here, right? This is where he's going to explain it. We're not doing it today. We're not close to that yet. So we'll see. So it's going to be explained. Ulefize, and because of this, im haya hamolad lemashal. So now he goes on to get into it deeply. If the molad, that is, if the new moon, that moment of the new moon, for example, lemashal, for example, beyom daled, suppose it was on Wednesday, the 4th day of the week. Suppose it happened that the molad actually occurred on Wednesday, achar chatzot, after midday, hayom, after the middle of the day, after the noon of the half of the day. Haya darush, it would make sense, right? One would have to say, sheyeh Rosh Chodesh be'oto hayom, that the Rosh Chodesh actually occurs then on that day, that the Rosh Chodesh occurs on Wednesday, because that's when the new moon took place. So I'm going to say this parenthetically, and possibly he's going to say this himself, but the truth is, up until midday, it's the old month. From midday on, it's the new month. But so what day do you declare as the new day, as the new month, as the beginning of the month? So, but anyway, he says the new month would be on Wednesday, Misha'at HaMolad, from the moment of new moon. That's a problem. Kamashmalan, and for this reason we learn from this verse that was quoted in Psalm 104, the af al pichein, that nevertheless ein monim Rosh Chodesh ela beyom Chamishi, that the Rosh Chodesh actually starts on day 5 on Thursday. So the new moon actually occurred on Wednesday, but the first day of the new month actually starts on Thursday, or let's say Wednesday evening, right after sunset. Vezehu peperush, and this is the explanation of Asa Yarech Lamoadim, that he made the moon for the appointed times, Shemesh Yada Mevo'or, that it's actual that when in other words, Mevo'or, which we are explaining as the sunset, actually I think is to be understood in an entirely different sense of the sun knows when the moon comes, when the new moon comes. Klomar, that is to say, she'az yachshavu hamoadim, that because of this, they should calculate the festivals, the appointed times, lefi cheshbon molad hayarech, according to the calculation of the new moon, rak achar biat hashemesh, only after the sun sets. So we can understand Mevo'or as referring to sunset. Excuse me once again, please forgive me. I'm hoping that I'm muted at those moments. Okay, so that's how he's explaining it. In other words, only after sunset shall oto yom, of that particular day. Exactly what he was saying when he says, though the new moon occurred on Wednesday, nevertheless the new month only begins Thursday. V'iyein od basamuch, and there's more to be said about this right next by, coming up. So that's this lovely interpretation of this particular midrash here. I wish in some ways it ended here, but it doesn't. It goes on to say, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, and Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, Omer, he says, and Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish is a later authority. He's someone mentioned in the Talmud. He's one of the scholars, great scholars, I would say, mentioned or leading scholars in the Talmud. He says, Ha-Chodesh. Just take the fact that it says Ha-Chodesh, the new moon, the ad sheyehe kulo min ha-Chodesh. So because it says the new moon, as with that definite article, it means only until the whole of it is, in other words, until the whole day is from the new moon, and not just part of the day. And this is from not the Babylonian Talmud here. It is actually from the Talmud of Jerusalem, the Jerusalem Talmud, and the tractate is Rosh Hashanah, which deals with various new moons. So it deals with calendrical issues. Perek Bet, chapter 2, halacha, it looks like a chet to me, halacha 8. Okay, and he's got more to say here. I am thinking very seriously that I'm happy to do it. It is, I will tell you, he is amazed. He brings up an interpretation of a certain Gemara by Rashi and questions that particular interpretation. I think that I'm going to leave it here partially for time purposes and partially for what I am trying to accomplish. But at any rate, I will leave it at that and give you a little time now for some comments. So I'm going to stop the share here. And believe me, this is, given the fact that this is the last time for us to look at this particular parsha, it is very hard for me to leave this parsha and not be able to continue to work on it with you right now, but with God's help, perhaps next year. So I will stop the share right now. Any thoughts? Were you able to follow that's the most important question, right? Was this something you were able to wrap your heads around?
I just have two questions, and I think that they're relatively simple answers. One is mitzvah always referring to sunset, or does it have just other, more generic meanings?
So, in the context of the sun, when we talk about bi'at hashemesh, right, we are talking about the setting of the sun. It's coming home, so to speak. That's where the coming, because bi'ah in this case means to come.
Okay, so it means it has a generic meaning, but it's also just you, okay.
Correct.
And the other question is the word hakafot related to chug?
Well, the word itself isn't, okay? It comes, the lahakif means to surround, I believe, and the hekef of something means its edge. So hakafot, one would think then that a hakafa would involve going around the edge of something. That's
Okay,
that's the
so it's
sense of
not
it.
from the same root as circle, it just, yeah,
No,
okay,
totally different roots. Totally
okay,
different roots.
thank you.
Yeah. You might though. Let me push this a little bit, and this is based on the studies and theorizing of Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch, who talks about the Hebrew words that when they come from the same part of the mouth, right? If the origin of the word comes from the same part of the mouth, so for example, labials, right? Or dentals, or in other words, he looks at the formation of words in that sense. So if you think of the word chug, cha, and a ga, right? Those are guttural letters, right? A hard, and ha and ka is also two throat sounds. Now the pei is a labial. Hekef. Look at
I
how
don't,
he's.
it feels like to me the k and the g come from different parts too.
They're
K
basically from the
comes from
back,
back here and k comes from down here.
but it's still from the back of the mouth if you think about it. They're not exactly the same place, but a g and a k come from exactly the same word, same place in the mouth, right? You're closing your soft palate against your throat. K, g, very similar letters, right? And ha and cha also very similar letters. So he would suggest that's why they're related. Golda, were you going to say something?
No,
Okay,
absolutely not. I'm
okay.
good.
So
I
nobody
love
has.
this stuff.
Well, let me.
Calendar's my thing.
Well, I want you to know, nobody has said they understood what I was doing.
I don't
So,
understand, Rabbi.
Understood,
I
yes.
understand, that's why I didn't comment.
Yeah,
okay,
right.
all right, very good.
I didn't understand, I'd ask for clarification.
Okay,
Mhm.
I
we.
don't. I don't understand what a part means. I mean, there's 60 minutes to an hour, 60 seconds to a minute in our way, but parts gets me. I part of what? 60 seconds is 60 parts.
No,
Mm-mm.
by part, right? And it's used now in a technical sense, right? You don't want to. Okay, it's a division of an hour. It's the division of an hour into 1,080 parts. Each part is 1/1,080th of an hour.
Oh, now I know.
Okay,
It's
so
it's
Okay.
it's
what
a
I was
different, it's base
Now
one at 1080 or whatever, it's just
correct.
a whole different
Yes,
idea, not 60.
I didn't
It's
know that.
this,
right,
yeah.
right.
And
Exactly.
I
I'm
did some research
Yes.
and found that the Egyptian calendar, the ancient Egyptian calendar, is very similar to the Roman calendar, where they did they just broke it up into sections. They had three seasons with 3 months in each season, and then they had a little bit of party time at the end of the year.
So they had a 3 month party.
No, they just had
Uh,
whatever was
This
left
oh, so
over
this
after their yeah, it was like 40 days in every month or something. I don't know, was there
oh, their months were
pull it back
longer.
up. Yeah, their months were longer. They had a 10-day week. So it
Mm.
just worked out. Yeah, it
Right.
works out
So
a little
four
bit. So
weeks.
it's 3
calendar.
times 4 is 12, but
Right.
they're still short a few days at the
Right.
end of the
Right.
year. So that's their, party 5 days or
Well,
something like that for
Right.
the
Right.
and for the beginning of the next year or something like that.
Right.
Romans had something very similar.
And of course, we know that the solar year is not exactly 365 and a quarter days. That's
Right.
also an approximation, which is why we got into that trouble and the difference between the Julian calendar, okay, and
Yep.
the Gregorian calendar. And the
Yep.
Is
fact that,
is that 354 days?
no, that's a lunar month. That's the approximate length of a lunar year. That if you
They
take,
just
Yeah.
didn't
if you
adjust for
multiply,
that extra little bit
yes,
that it
that
doesn't
tiny little
do.
bit, that's
Yeah.
right, which the
Every
Babylonians,
1,000 years or something like that.
right, right. So at the millennium, right? So what happens is this: there is no leap year at maybe at the no at the century um, at the century marks. Uh, there I'm trying to think of how this works out, but
We had a leap
I
year at
know
this
at the
century, but
millennium, right?
yeah,
So at the
yeah.
millennium, you don't have a leap year, or you do have a leap year at the millennium, but at the centuries, you don't have a leap year. That's how they make up for. I mean, I may have that wrong, and
Something
it may
like
be just
that.
the
That's yeah.
opposite, but it's there. It's at that particular moment that you make the corrections, that you try to make the corrections.
Right.
But
So sometimes you'll see dates of people like like George Washington or something like that, when they
yeah,
have a Julian date and a Gregorian date, because that was around the time they were cleaning that, they were doing
right,
a little
right.
cleaning of that.
Under Pope Gregory, I guess,
Hmm.
is the when this happened. Oh, I would think,
And
right?
Julian is Julius Caesar.
Yeah, yeah, but Roman. But the
Hmm.
ones who did it actually were the Egyptians. They were the
Yeah.
ones who came up. But look at the Babylonians, who are even more accurate. All right, everyone, take care. The time has come, and thank you for making. Oh, let's make a Kaddish quickly before we do this. And I think there was a request that we record, because I'm still recording, to record Kaddish de Rabbanan. So for those people who are
We're
watching.
not at a minion.
Well,
Are
It
we?
we
doesn't
have,
matter.
Oh, we weren't. We
yeah,
weren't, I guess.
We
Sorry.
weren't today.
No, we
Yeah.
weren't. Okay, so we will
Next
not be doing
time
it. God willing. God willing.
it will
All right.
happen again,
There we
I
go.
believe.
Okay, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Oh, I thought you were gonna do.